Hello, everyone, and welcome to UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts. I am Blaine Gilmer here with my co-host Jed May, and we are here to talk to you about Georgia football recruiting, as always, live here on the UGA Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe if you don't already, because content is just going to start pouring out. I mean, football season practice starts Wednesday, I think. Jed, or they report Wednesday, practice on Thursday. So football season is here. It's getting going. So, Jed, first of all, how's everything going, man? And excited that we're in football month.
Yeah, it's going all right. It's not the greatest time in the world to be a Cleveland Browns fan like I am, but other than that, it's going good. Like, you can't complain about too much when there's high school football starting. I think scrimmages start next weekend, and then you got the regular season after that. So hard to complain too much when you got football right around the corner.
Absolutely. And, when you talk about high school scrimmages and high school games, that's something here at UGA Sports that we're very excited to be able to bring you coverage of. So another reason to be a member of UGAsports.com over there on the vault. Not only do you get to ask questions here every week on rumors versus facts and interact on one of what I consider the greatest, message board out there. I mean, it's been around since 1997, and just have a great time each and every day interacting with people. But also, you get to see some behind-the-scenes type footage stuff that we're going to bring you, Jed. We're going to be going to games around not only Georgia, but I'm sure you'll go to a couple in other states and things like that to catch some Georgia targets. And being the national analyst you are, I'm sure you'll be helping out on that end of it too. But excited to cover some high school football here soon.
Yeah, and you look at Georgia. I mean, Georgia's got – Monroe Freeling is in, I believe, Charleston. You got Jaden Davis in the Charlotte area. You got Jacksonville, which has become such a hotbed, like Jordan Hall's in Jacksonville. Colin Hurley's down there in Jacksonville, a 25 quarterback. Not to mention all the talent that's over in Alabama. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. Like I said, I want to say scrimmage. There's some scrimmages going on next weekend, which is kind of snuck up on me a little bit. But yeah, really excited to get out on the road next week and start seeing some kids in action other than 7-on-7s in camps.
Absolutely. Time for some real football, putting on the pads, not just in high school, but college and NFL. All of it's starting to get cranked up. So you can basically smell it in the air when it comes to August right here. We're getting ready to get going. And speaking of August, we've hit the dead period for recruiting, Jed. Now that really the only communication you can have is via text. There's no calls. There's no on-campus visits, all that kind of stuff. So it's much more low-key. Some of those key visits have taken place here in the last week with the Dawg Days of Summer event that Georgia held, some key recruits being in there. I'm sure we'll be talking about many of those. We got lots of questions. So let's check in with some of these guys here on the YouTube channel. We got SC Low Country Dog say good evening, dog fans. We got Alan Riles hopping in there. So I absolutely love your show. We appreciate you tuning in, Alan. So, lots of people tuning in here. Tell us where you're from. We'd really like to know where you're checking in from. So it's he said this Montana dog. So we got Francisco coming all the way in from Montana. So make sure to tell us where you're watching from. And we appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button, like we said. So here we go. Let's touch on some news, Jed. So far, it was a big weekend of visitors, as I said. Jaden Davis was in town. You've got lots of, 2024 guys that were in town. Ricky Gibson, a 2023 defensive back that absolutely wowed Georgia a couple of weeks ago. What other guys have you kind of talked to that were in town this weekend and maybe that Georgia got a chance to make an impression on?
Yeah, not this weekend, but Jordan Hall, a big defensive tackle out of Jacksonville, was here, I think, Tuesday through Wednesday. Saturday, King Joseph Edwards out of Buford was in town. KJ Bolden out of Buford was in town. Jaden Davis, you mentioned Ricky Gibson. Monroe Freeling was in town, although he is a difficult guy to get a hold of on the phone. He was in town, and that's a guy that there has been some smoke on the board yesterday, Blaine, where we were mentioning that we were hearing that Bo Hewley might end up flipping to Auburn. That smoke has kind of died down a little bit, but if that eventually were to happen, that makes Monroe Freeling that much more important. So, yeah, Sokovie White, a 24 guys in town that's just exploded over the past few months. Personally, I think he's a future receiver at the next level, just with how explosive he is. He was in town. Gosh, there's so many. I just can't even think of them all. But yeah, it's just a huge weekend. This was the weekend. They did the same thing last year. They had the cookout, they had the slip and slide, the indoor facility, the good food, the relay races, stuff like that. So, and you talked to a lot of these kids, and like, yeah, this is a pretty unique setup with the games and all. And Georgia does a good job of that because you think back a couple months, right, Blaine? You got the scavenger hunt, which is another, I guess, not your typical show up to campus, go to meetings with the coaches, all that kind of stuff. So, it's a big weekend for Georgia. It always is with this kind of thing, and from all accounts, it went pretty well.
Absolutely. The Georgia's on-campus recruiting. We've said it on here many times, second to none. They do a great job. That not only the coaches but the support staff puts a lot of time into it. A lot of hours go into preparation for that, welcoming those prospects and their families and things of that nature. So we are, happy to bring all of the news, notes, insight that we've gathered from that weekend to you guys. Like we said, thanks for tuning in. And okay, so we have, let's see, what do we want to touch on first? I mentioned Ricky.
I was going to give a couple of shout outs to these guys in the YouTube comments. Jeff P from Commerce and Jotham Down Road, dude, I know exactly where that is. My grandmother lives in Isla. Go past Jotham Down Road, eat lunch all the time. Know exactly where you're at. And we got Randy Gibson from Toccoa, home with Ben Cleveland. Ben Cleveland played against my Madison County Red Raiders in high school. Got a buddy who swores he pushed him up and down the field. So I don't know about that. But Randy's also got a question. What's the chances of us landing the kid out of Jefferson, the linebacker, Sammy Brown? I will say I think Georgia is one of the favorites. Clemson's there. Tennessee is there. I think this summer's been big for Sammy because he's got to see some new places, Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame. I believe this summer's when he got out to Oklahoma for the first time, and there's the obvious Brian Bosworth comparison, right, with his hair. But I think Georgia's positioned itself to be that school that's going to be there for the long run. I don't know if you I don't know, like I wouldn't put it in a future cast for him like today or whatever, but I definitely think Georgia is one of the favorites there for Sammy Brown and will be throughout. I don't think he's going to commit. He's going to be one of those guys that takes his officials next summer and everything before he commits, but definitely Georgia's going to be one of the favorites there for Sammy Brown.
Absolutely. A guy that I wanted to talk about before we get to Vault questions, Ricky Gibson. I told people on the Vault that I'd be sharing a little bit of news here that we haven't even reported yet. Ricky Gibson's going to be making a commitment on August 14th, and he is going to make his decision known out there. Penn State, Tennessee, Georgia, those are some of the main contenders there. He'll probably drop a top three. I wouldn't be surprised if those guys were the guys included in it. Ricky Gibson is defensive back out of Alabama. In fact, he's going to be taking on Georgia commit A.J. Harris in a matchup in week 1 of their high school season, Jed. And Ricky Gibson is a guy who showed up at a Georgia camp, wasn't really heavily recruited by Georgia, and just, casually runs a 4.3 laser timed 40 and jumps a 41-inch vertical. And, I think Will Muschamp blew a hammy trying to get over there to trying to run over to him to make sure he gave that kid an offer right after he jumped that 41-inch vertical. So Ricky Gibson is a guy that I think Tennessee, obviously, with their culture and the way things are trending under Josh Heupel, hey, you can't say that it's not a program without momentum. It is, but I think Georgia really impressed Ricky Gibson. He was there for 2 days this weekend, and that's big, getting the last on-campus visit with him before a commitment decision goes down on August 14th.
Yeah, and he's a guy we told y'all at the beginning of the summer, right? There's going to be guys that come out of nowhere and come to camp and just blow the coaches away. And Ricky Gibson is, don't know who Ricky Dixon is. If you're out there, please comment. But Ricky Gibson's one of those guys that shows up and, some of those things you just can't teach. Is he a little raw? I mean, probably, but you can't teach, like you said, the speed and the broad jump and all this other kind of stuff, the 40 times. So, I mean, it's hard not to look at Georgia as the favorite. He's been in Athens multiple times here over the past couple months, and like you said, that last visit before a commitment with a couple weeks is now the question for Georgia is, with it being a couple weeks, does a so-called visit high maybe wear off? But I think where Georgia's positioned itself well enough to where they're going to feel good going into that commitment here. I guess 2 weeks from yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. So the clock is ticking on that one. Then we mentioned Jaden Davis being in town, 2024 quarterback. You mentioned him a little bit earlier, out of the Charlotte area, was originally from Georgia, grew up a Georgia fan. Talked to some sources, and apparently that visit could not have gone any better for Jaden Davis in terms of how he is communicating with the coaches about the system. They're being very open and honest about how everything went down with the Arch Manning process, because that's something that guys want to know about. And I mean, in fact, there were questions that Arch Manning asked the staff about, apparently about, okay, what's going on with these other quarterback situations in the past. So Georgia's quarterback pass is something they have to answer for with the quarterbacks now. Apparently those answers were satisfactory to Jaden Davis and his family. Look for Jaden Davis to show back up in Athens for, I would say, multiple games this fall. I don't think just one. I think he'll be back for multiple, could even be back for that Oregon game. Jed, it seems like it's a Julian Sayin, Jaden Davis race to be the first one committed to Georgia in the class of 2024. But we keep saying that, but Julian Sayin, he still hasn't done anything yet. So do you kind of see it that way with those two quarterbacks? Hey, first one to jump on board. And do you think Georgia, actually ends up getting one of those two?
Yeah, I don't think the staff has prioritized one guy over the other. They love both of them. Julian Sayin's been in Athens, I believe, 3 times. Would you say, well, that's not that many? When you consider he's in California and he's a 24 guy, hasn't taken official visits, so hasn't gotten any visits paid for. That's that's not a negligible amount. But it's interesting because, like you said, Julian Sayin, he's got this late October, early November commitment timeline that he's kind of looking at. He hasn't moved it up yet. He's made no indication he's going to do so. He hasn't indicated he's going to reclassify to 2023. Jaden Davis told our North Carolina State writer, J.C. Zimble, a couple weeks ago, flat out, I am not committing, or I am not reclassifying to 2023, despite some typos I made on the board earlier saying the opposite. So,
some typos.
That's the thing. So, it's going to be interesting. I mean, right now, I think the way Davis made it seem to JC when he had that interview was he's going to take his time with the process. Michigan's heavily involved there. Clemson's in. North Carolina's in. I believe he mentioned Penn State in that interview as well. So, I mean,
even LSU could have a shot.
I mean, even if he committed in, say, February, that's just spitballing a date. That's still several months after Julian Sayin's playing commitment date. So if Julian Sayin calls the Georgia staff up and says, "Hey, I want to be a Bulldog," the staff's going to give him a green light, I believe, even if they think they're in a position with Jaden Davis, and they're just going to say, "Okay, we got our goal in this class is to get one of these two guys. We got Julian Sayin if he's coming first, and Jaden Davis, best of luck to you in your future endeavors." So I don't think they're going after one or the other. I think they want to get one of them. And if it happens to be Sayin wants to go first. Now, if Jaden Davis calls him tomorrow and he's like, you know what, screw this Michigan thing, I'm ready to go ahead and commit, then they would welcome him with open arms, right? But what we have to go on right now, Julian Sayin at least has a timeline, a vague timeline anyway in mind. And Jaden Davis seems like he's going to be taking a little longer. So if I had to bet today, I would say Julian Sayin is going to be committing first, and Georgia's in a good position in his recruitment.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to be waiting on Jaden Davis, I think, first of all, I put a note out there about reclassification becoming a more prevalent trend. I was not talking about Jaden Davis. There are some elite prospects out there, and we've said that we will not say who those guys are because we are never going to tip a prospect's hand. That's just not the business that we're in. If something's imminent, of course, but if there's something that's literally being worked through between parents and counselors and at a kid's school and trying to find out if they can do that or not, we are not going to do that. But I will tell you, not Jaden Davis, but there are some elite prospects at positions of need that Georgia is targeting that could move up from the 2024 to 2023, from 2025 to 2024. So there are some major reclassification possibilities out there. Now, on the Jaden Davis front, I think that Julian Sayin definitely is going to commit to a school before Jaden Davis. I don't think Jaden Davis makes a decision until after he takes his official visits. Honestly, I think it's more this time next year for Jaden Davis before he makes a decision. So here's your question. If you're the Georgia staff, just like you said, when you missed out, you put all your eggs in one basket and you missed out on Arch Manning. I don't think you can afford to do the same, Jed, in this class. They've got to take a quarterback that they believe in, possibly even take two quarterbacks in the class of 2024, because guess what? I know everybody wants to say, oh, that Vandergriff and Stockton and Beck, oh, they're all such, they're so loyal. They're good dogs and all that kind of stuff. Guess what? There's only one quarterback on the field. Somebody's going to leave. Okay. And you're going to be left in that situation. You could be left in that situation again, like Georgia was when Jake Fromm was the only one there other than a very young Stetson Bennett. Okay. And he was the only quarterback they had the year 2019 when they faced LSU in the SEC championship game. Georgia, Kirby Smart, Georgia had vowed never to be in that situation again. They're going to have a stacked quarterback room. Wouldn't be surprised if Georgia takes two guys. Maybe not. Obviously, you're not going to get a Sayin and a Davis in the same class, but a Sayin and a guy that's more of a project type guy, sure. Also, in the class of 2023, remind everybody about the preferred walk-on quarterback that called up Todd Monken out of nowhere. Refresh people in case they didn't hear that last week.
Yeah, his name is Will Pritchard, I guess. Pritchard or Prikard, one. He's out of Florida. And yeah, he posted on Twitter he got a preferred walk-on scholarship offer, and I reached out to him saying, hey, how'd this come about? He's like, yeah, I just called up Todd Monken, see if they had any PWO spots. And I was like, that's not usually how those kinds of things work. When you got guys hitting up coaches, they just go straight to the junk mail or whatever. But yeah, Monken likes his film. Prikard is hoping to get up. I've already said it twice. I think Prikard sounds more distinguished in my mind, but he's hoping to get up to Athens for a visit. And he was basically saying, yeah, I don't have a timeline. I could go at any time. Now the question is, Florida seems to be the other favorite top school, whatever. Florida, it appears, has offered him a scholarship. So do you go where the money is? If you're like, it would seem to me you would just take the scholarship over the walk-on spot, but then there's a lot of variables there, basically. It's two kind of different scales. So long answer, that's a guy that Georgia could be looking at. We've mentioned Casey Wiseman a bunch, although that ship, we haven't heard a whole lot there, which would make me think that Georgia's not necessarily acting soon on the Casey Wiseman front, maybe wait for some game film. So, yeah, is it possible Georgia takes a quarterback in this 23 class? I mean, I guess it's possible still, but I think, like you said, Blaine, I think at this point, the more likely scenario is they end up taking two guys in that 24 cycle.
Well, I will say this, okay, and this is just off a couple of days of recent developments, all right? I think Georgia's going to pull together a wide receiver class that is going to be far exceed the expectations of even a couple of weeks ago. There's some receivers that look like they're trending towards Georgia that is really, really impressive for Brian McClendon if he does bring these guys in the first class. Georgia's the first class of him being the wide receivers coach. I think you're talking about guys like Anthony Evans that Georgia's in a dogfight with Oklahoma that I think, they're in really good position there. Tyler Williams, they already have Raymond Cottrell, Yazid Haynes, who they flipped from Penn State. A lot of speed, a lot of down the field breakaway, type route running guys in that class. if they were to add somebody like a Hakeem Williams on top of it, who Georgia's, kind of going head to head with Texas A&M for, it's not out of the realm of possibility that a high profile quarterback is flipped in the class of 2023. I'm not talking about Arch Manning. No. So don't
It's
crash
always about Arch Manning, Blaine.
don't crash the comments. Don't crash the comments, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Georgia flips a quarterback in the class of 2023 late. At least I know that there's some some legwork being done behind the scenes on one of those. So make sure you're tuned into the vault as things get closer to December. I promise that kind of stuff is going to heat up. That's a reason to be a part of the UGASports.com family so that we can provide you with insights like that. So make sure to subscribe here, go over to UGASports.com and check out the vault. And speaking of the vault, Jed, it's time to kick off our questions from these guys. So let's start off with B Hodge 0702.
B Hodge, the guy who called me out of my typo earlier when I accidentally said Julian saying was reclassifying. So appreciate you calling me there. B Hodge, what does our D-line board look like, and where do we stand with each prospect?
Okay, so D-line, we know you mentioned Jordan Hall was in town. Georgia desperately wants to go after James Smith and get James Smith inked. I think those two are far and away the top targets. If they could get James Smith and Jordan Hall, then Trey Scott on top of Jamal Jarrett, Trey Scott would sleep a happy man. I would say. I mean, he would be looking at a contract extension, raise, all that kind of stuff, bringing in that kind of talent. Jed, I think there's some other guys out there, Xavier McLeod, other guys. Anybody else come to mind that you can think of on the defensive front?
Yeah, Xavier McLeod was in town this weekend. Jamal Jarrett is in his ear. Pretty good. South Carolina, Michigan also really involved there. I mean, there's Kelby Collins, who we've talked about before, as a guy that's a little bit of a tweener, a Trayvon Walker type in terms of,
body type stuff.
Right. I don't think
not athleticism at this point.
Yeah, he pumped the brakes on the Trayvon Walker comps, but I don't think Georgia at this point. I would say Collins ends up elsewhere. Alabama's in there, Florida's in there. I mean, if we're gonna go to the if we're going to blur the lines between D-line and edge, there's Nicholas Harbor out there. There's Samuel
Kamar and James is another one that I think people need to look at. He's a guy that I know a lot of people think is going to Florida, but I think Georgia is more heavily involved than people know there. So, and I may have mispronounced the young man's first name. It may be Cameron James, Cameron Kamar, and it's one of those two. But he's a young man that they are heavily recruiting, and I know for a fact that Georgia's in communication with on regularly. So keep an eye out for that young man. All right, Jed, what do you think about this question from Jay Doggy here?
Yeah, with the impact of NIL on recruiting, do you guys see a significant impact in last-minute flips come early signing day, a last-minute NIL offer changing a kid's mind?
Well, let's just be candid, okay? It definitely happened last year. Look at Kamari Wilson, okay? Georgia wanted Kamari Wilson. Kamari Wilson's mom and dad wanted him to go to Georgia. Didn't want him to remain in the state of Florida, but yet he remained in the state of Florida. And, that happened very late. So you call that what you will. I think you're definitely going to see some guys in schools, Jed, that if they don't have all the needs met, all of a sudden a booster, that is running a collective may just magically find a kid's phone number and give them a call and start opining on all the great qualities of the university that they support, mixed with a little, little incentive.
Yeah, it's like you said about being candid. Like, you'd have to be stupid to think that kind of thing will not happen or has not already happened last year, right? Which then you open up the question of that's added calculus for these schools, right? If player X comes to their coach and says, "Hey, so and so offered me, $500,000, that's another calculus and saying, okay, well, we want this kid in our class. Do we $500,000 want him? And then those schools might have to go somewhere else. So like that's one more late wrinkle. And that's the crazy, Kirby Smart has talked about this a lot with how the recruiting calendar is. Georgia makes the SEC championship game. What the SEC championship games on a Saturday, and then 3 or 4 days later is early signing day. So how do these coaches sleep during that week? I don't know, but that's one more, I guess, added layer of calculations or whatever these guys are going to have to do on that week. So I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it has happened. It will happen, and it's going to happen until the NCAA puts guidelines down or there's federal regulation or whatever. But that's the world now. That's the world we live in.
100%. All right, OU Herschel Walker. Do we have a better chance with McLeod or Hall? What are the chances of getting both? Jed, what do you think? I think, like I said, I think that Jordan Hall and James Smith would both be higher on the pecking order than McLeod. I think there's probably maybe a higher chance to get McLeod than there is, both of those first two that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think out of those two, I would give Georgia a better chance with Jordan Hall. I talked to him today. Story coming out tomorrow. He's really high on Georgia. Loves Trey Scott. He's another one of those guys that the coaching staff called the night of the draft. They FaceTimed him from Vegas and like, hey, dude, this could be you. And that happened with Jamal Jarrett. We know how that turned out. Georgia landed Jamal a couple weeks ago. So now, personally, I think at this point, Georgia has a better chance maybe with McLeod than Smith if we're talking about getting two guys. Yeah, I mean, Blaine, what do you think? I think James Smith is trending elsewhere personally. What do you think?
The thing with James Smith is there's just such a connection between Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann and that area, that Montgomery area, because they've been there. They recruited that area heavily, have a lot of connections to that area that are directly tied to Quay Russaw and James Smith. And I think both of those guys actually want to play, college football together. So, having a good foot in the door with Quay Russaw doesn't hurt Georgia's, hurt things for Georgia on the James Smith front either. So, when it comes down to it, I think Alabama and Auburn, Georgia, all right in the mix for those. But like you said, I like Jordan Hall for Georgia than I do McLeod right now. So I don't know that you can get both. That would certainly be a huge pull.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, big deal for Trey Scott if he could do that. Now, Jed, I'll take this one. As you can see, I've got a Monday Night Raw going over here on my shoulder because I am a huge wrestling fan, and OU Herschel Walker likes to play along and say, which manager wins a cage match? Man, we got some cage match questions tonight. Battle royal between Jim Cornette, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Paul Bearer, Precious Paul Aaron, Jimmy Hart, Paul Heyman, and J.J. Dillon. I'm gonna have to go with Bobby the Brain Heenan. People don't realize Bobby the Brain Heenan was actually a really good wrestler before he got into the managing thing and hurt his neck and all that kind of stuff. So don't underestimate the weasel. I'm gonna give it to Bobby the Brain. OU Herschel Walker. We appreciate you playing into my little wrestling stuff there. That's good stuff. So Jay, we got one from Jeremy 2021.
Paul Bearer is just such an awesome name. That's so good. Is there a commitment time frame I missed for Samuel Mpemba? Chances of landing him, and then also Samson Okunlola.
Yeah, Mpemba is not going to make a decision before December. I mean, he's going to take it to December. He's told me that multiple times. Like he said that he's just going to take it to the wire. I don't. If he does, that would mean some significant development has taken place, and we talked about those developments a little bit earlier. I see you in the comments over there, Foghorn. Okay, I see you talking about Paul Ehrling being a wrestler, but you're underestimating Bobby the Brain Heenan's ability to cheat. Okay, Harry Leg says Cornette has a tennis racket. That's true. But anyways, back to the question here. I think Mpemba, okay, waits this one out closer to December. I think Georgia has a really good chance of landing him there. I think it's, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, Miami, who else? Tennessee. There's even Alabama. There's lots of schools there that are in this thing with Mpemba. Okunlola, Jed, I think that ship sailed.
Yeah, I don't see him picking Georgia. I mean, if we're talking about commitment timeline, I think it's going to be either later in the season or, like you said, closer to early signing day, because I know he's I believe has 2 officials left, if not 3, and at this point is obviously going to be taking those during the season. But yeah, I don't see Georgia getting Okunlola, which kind of goes back to what I said earlier with Monroe Freeling and Bo Hughley, because I don't think Georgia's getting Okunlola. I don't think they're getting TJ Shanahan. So those are 2 5-star targets that Georgia's really that they kind of swung and missed on. I think they were in it a little more for Shanahan than Okunlola. Now, if Georgia gets Okunlola back on campus for an official, I mean, you never know. But yeah, I think that ship's probably sailed. But talking about commitment timeline, yeah, I think it'll be later in the season or maybe towards early signing day for Samson.
For sure. Let's hit the YouTube comments real quick. We got one here from Randy Gibson. He says, any word on how Branson Robinson is doing? Are we going to go after more running backs in this class? RBU's getting whooped as far as big name backs. What's up with that? Now, yeah, hey, they lost out on Justice Haynes and Richard Young, but I wouldn't put it past Del McGee to flip somebody here in this class of 2023. They're still pursuing Justice Haynes. I wouldn't bet a significant amount of money that mattered to my family that Justice Haynes is going to flip from Alabama, but they're going to pursue him until the ink is dry on signing day for sure. You can bet that.
Hey, I'll tell you this about Branson Robinson. I wouldn't want to get in a fight with him. I don't know how he's doing on the football field, but I'm not risking physical bodily harm by making that dude mad, because he could throw me into a wall and not even think about it. So
it's for sure. Branson Robinson is a physical specimen. I'll tell you this. I've done some talking to some sources at Georgia. They're very, very impressed by Branson Robinson early on, and I wouldn't be shocked if you see Branson get some meaningful carries here in the 2022 season. Not just mop up duty or something like that. Some meaningful work for Georgia, because the young man is an absolute specimen. A6A4F18 says, who are some of the potential flips by signing day? Well, I think you're not going to see some of those potential flips come into play right now, because I think there's going to be some guys that Georgia maybe loses out on. Of course, you talked about guys that could flip away from Georgia, like potentially a Bo Hughley, Jed. So I think it's going to kind of be much like the question we got earlier. What do you need right at the end, and how much are you willing to do to be able to flip somebody in the world of NIL and things like that these days? So I think those are going to come into play later on. But I think offensive line is going to be the main position that you probably see Georgia having to flip somebody late. And then if they were to have 4, 5 top-notch, 4-star and higher receivers in this class by, let's say, November, then that would be an incentive to maybe go get a quarterback that they'd had contact with before and flip him before signing day.
Yeah, like you said, I think offensive line, especially again with how the Bo Hughley situation turns out, keep an eye on that one. If you want one name, look at Roderick Robinson. He's a running back from California. He's committed to UCLA. Georgia's been in contact. He actually posted on Twitter that he got his official offer today. I'm not saying anything's imminent. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just trying to be a good show host and give you one name to keep an eye on. So watch Roderick Robinson there, running back out of California.
There you go. The national analyst has spoken. He's got some contacts out of the West Coast. Mm-hmm. All right, Dirty Low Country Dog, Jed, has a question for us.
Yeah, any chance of flipping Stefan Green, defensive tackle from Rome, that's currently committed to the Rock Petters. That would be Clemson.
Affectionately, the Clemson
It's
Tigers.
known as the Rock Petters.
So here's the deal. A lot of guys that commit to Clemson early on, and I know that Dalen Everett was a guy that Georgia flipped, last year. But most of the time, when guys commit to Clemson, Jed, they're locked in. That's where they want to go. One, because Clemson's weird in how they recruit, and if you buy into that the first way around, then you're drinking that Dabo Kool-Aid. You know what I'm saying? So I would imagine that Green stays with Clemson. I'm sure Georgia's going to be in, but I don't think Georgia put a full court press on Stefan Green even when he was uncommitted.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't think Georgia really pursued him that hard. I mean, I believe they made his top 8 or top 6 or whatever. But I don't think Georgia was a super serious factor there. Now, when you look at the defensive line board, say in some doomsday scenario, Georgia misses on Jordan Hall, Xavier McLeod, and James Smith, then you could see Georgia go back to Stefan Green and say, "Hey, you sure you don't want to come stay home and play in Athens?" But like you said, I don't think Georgia was a super serious factor in this recruitment before he committed to Clemson. So I'd put the probability there pretty low.
Absolutely. We have yet another, and this one a more odd one from PA Dog 610. Yet a question on cage matches.
Yeah, who wins a cage match between me, Blaine, and Trent? PA Dog has his money on me, so I appreciate that as a fellow, got bloodlines up in the north. I don't know, man.
We've established that Jed's a lover, not a fighter. Okay?
Yeah, I don't like. I don't know. I think I'd go into it and I think I'd fight dirty, and then I'd just be like, yeah, you know what? It's not just.
Jed's got the reach. Okay, so if it turns into a boxing match, Jed's got us all. I'm sure Trent would do well because he did teach at Gainesville High School, and that's kind of like I'm sure that got him well prepared for some combat situations teaching at Gainesville High School. But other than that, guys, that's just a fun little deal there from PA Dog. Appreciate you tuning in every week, man. We really appreciate it. Pine Tree 1. How are things looking for Russaw and Damon Wilson? He's talking about Quay Russaw out of Carver in Montgomery. And then he says, Kurt Angle moonsault from the top of the cage is the most surprisingly athletic and ballsy thing I've ever seen in wrestling. Disagree. Well, probably the more athletic thing was when Brock Lesnar tried to do the moonsault with Kurt Angle in WrestleMania, except he landed on his neck and about killed himself right there. And, so that gave himself a concussion. That's pretty impressive. Seeing Vader do a moonsault at over, almost 400 pounds, really impressive. And some of the stuff the Big Show used to do too, but that's enough wrestling right there. So how are things looking for Quay Russaw and Damon Wilson? Okay, so Damon Wilson out of Venice, Florida, edge guy. Quay Russaw, of course, as I said, out of Montgomery, Alabama. They don't get two bigger targets than those two for Georgia on the edge. I mean, you got Mpemba and Nichols that are right up there as well, but Russaw and Wilson very much so are wanted by Chidera Uzo-Diribe and this Georgia staff in the class of 2023.
Yeah, Russaw's got that crazy athleticism, right, where they were originally, or not about originally, but they were earlier in the cycle recruiting him as an inside linebacker, and then now the focus has kind of shifted to outside, and then Damon Wilson's got, remember, he's the one, for those who have forgotten, he's the one that showed up that first weekend in June, and we saw this giant guy in these pictures, and we're like, who is this? And he showed up for a multi-day unofficial that first weekend. So, they're both, like you said, they're both guys Georgia's going after. Russaw, over the summer, things were really heating up between him and Georgia. That's cooled off a little bit as other teams have really kind of pulled up in the race, and he's obviously got the factor with James Smith and potentially being you hate to use the term pack. There's those two are about as close to a package deal as you get, Blaine. I know you're close to that situation. They're really tight. They train together, all that kind of stuff. So, and then Damon Wilson, yeah, Georgia's going after him hard. I mean, I don't know, Blaine, what do you think? If I had a bet today, if they got one, I don't know. I think I might say Damon Wilson. What do you think?
I don't know. I just
I honestly don't know.
I think that they're both far from decisions. I really do.
Yeah.
Even though they've got it honed down to 4 or 5 schools that they're looking at, I think these are both guys that when you talk about that NIL that we talked about earlier, I think both of these guys being elite edge guys that can really get after the passer. That there's a market for that, and these collectives are going to find that. So and they're going to find that market, I'm sure, out there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in terms of those two. I think that Georgia is very, very close with Quay Russaw. He loves how Georgia goes about their defense, how they use guys in that defense, the versatility. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how those two play out. But I think Quay Russaw, maybe I'm going to go the opposite and just say Quay Russaw might have a little bit better chance of ending up at Georgia right now. So we'll see. I don't know. It's both of them are right in the mix. But we'll take a couple more questions from YouTube before we sign off here. So we got Clay Williams on here with us. He says, what positions will Kirby likely go to the transfer portal for this year? So meaning this offseason. Jed, I think you could see a quarterback get brought in if it was the right one. If they don't, obviously if they don't take a high school guy in the class of 2023, or maybe they took a Will Pritchard, whatever his name is, as a preferred walk-on. If they did that, they could still take one, depending on who transfers after this year. You never know what goes on in that case. I think running back could be a position that if, let's say, Georgia elects not to take a running back in the class of 2023, they don't want to feel like they're reaching on somebody. They could. I think there's going to be a plentiful market of experienced running backs that are looking for opportunities elsewhere. And then I always think Georgia would take a look at both wide receiver and defensive back. But I mean, anything specific that comes to mind for you think?
I could see maybe looking at an edge rusher if they find a guy that's a good fit, because Nolan Smith and not Bradley Beal, Robert Beal, not the basketball player.
Bradley Beal. That's
Robert
a lot
Beal.
of points per game to replace right there.
Yeah. I mean, those two will be gone after the year. So maybe now that could also depend on, and that's where kind of some of the uncertainty comes in, because say it depends on how much experience the guys behind Nolan and Robert get this year, what the staff sees from them. Like, I think those decisions might not be made until the end of the season, right? And you see what you've gotten from some of these guys in game through a whole fall of practices and games. So, but yeah, like you said, I think they're always going to be on the lookout for a receiver or a defensive back that might fit. Then everything else, quarterback, running back, maybe an edge, kind of program dependent there.
Dylan Stroud says, think there's something to say about the connection of David Hill and staff and DeAndre Moore. I'm assuming David Hill is the guy they just brought in from Desert Pines out there in Nevada, and then you got DeAndre Moore, who's from out there as well. I'm not 100% certain on that, Dylan, honestly. So don't quote me on that. But hey, there's a reason they bring in guys like that, Jed, guys with connections. So, and I think the guy that came in from Desert Pines actually is. His title is the director of connections, high school connections. So, it is what it is. It'll be interesting to see. But DeAndre Moore Jr., hey, guys like him, guys like Rico Flores that Georgia was, in it with until the end of their recruitment. There's lots of guys out there that, Georgia could always end up, if not in this class, guys are going to hit the transfer portal a year, 2 years, into their high school, college career. And Georgia does a really good job of staying connected to those guys, if you will.
Yeah, and that's what we talk about. You recruit to the transfer portal now, and you don't burn bridges. You bring in directors of connections. Everyone laughs at all the staff titles that Billy Napier had down there, and then Georgia gets a director of connections. Then it's not so funny anymore. Yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's like we're talking about with NIL. That's the world now, because these guys, so many of these guys will be back on the market in a year or two, and then Kirby and staff are going to have those relationships to fall back on.
Absolutely. Greg Rosenberg says Monken has a rep for having tough personality to work with. He's a genius play caller, but his personality hurting offensive recruiting. Woo! Greg's pulling no punches here. Hey, when you're an NFL guy that doesn't have to recruit for a living, and then you get thrown into the wow, we've been spammed on the
2 weeks in a row, man.
Spammed on the thing. I'm going to block this. Nobody click on that X-rated link over there in the chat. I mean, geez, I know that was probably who probably put that in that chat. Maybe Harry Legg or Brett Weimer over there spamming us with a link in the chat. No, but we appreciate you guys.
Something about Chuck Ward's the one that said something about a foreign object hidden in tights.
So, yeah. Hey, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. I would definitely not use knuckles in a brass knucks in a cage match. But yeah, Greg, I think some guys are really good play callers, and maybe they don't have the infectious personality that some guys do. Like Adele McGee is really known for, and I know people are going to make jokes. Well, what about Justice Haynes? He's just really known, like Tovani Mitchell and his father. I spoke to them, class of 2024 running back this past weekend. He was there for 2 days, and they said the biggest thing was that Dale McGee really wants to get to know your family. He wants to know your interests. He wants to know your likes, your dislikes, what everybody in your family thinks about Georgia, what they want to do in the future going forward, all this kind of stuff. I don't know if Todd Monken is kind of hitting that kind of groove yet in recruiting that way. I know Steve Sarkisian, even with his troubles, off the field aside, is a very engaging guy, personality, and who knows, that may have had a bigger impact with Arch Manning. So, it's going to be interesting. Jed, your thoughts on this?
Well, when you're a guy like Todd Monken and you have an up close personal view of a spectacular demise like the 2019 Cleveland Browns, that can leave a mark on somebody. There's PTSD involved. That could have a lasting impact on somebody. So,
you got to kind of be a jerk to be the offensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns, right?
Yeah, clearly. So no, I don't know. It's one of those things where it could seem like that from the outside. He doesn't seem, you watch the energy of, well, one, you don't even see Todd Monken on the sidelines because he sits in the booth, but you see a lot more of that outward energy from Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann and Chidera Uzo-Diribe, if you follow him on social media. So I don't know. I'm sure, Arch Manning and his family liked him, right? They developed a close relationship. So I don't know. I don't think that's hurting offensive recruiting. Are there some guys that might not stick with him? Yeah, sure. But there's some guys that don't mesh with Kirby, and that it is what it is. So no, I don't think there's anything too much to read into that.
I hear you. Well, guys, that is it for our show here tonight on UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts. We've covered a lot of ground on the recruiting front here. Make sure that you are tuned into us over on the UGAsports.com vault. I'm going to have a story going out on Ricky Gibson tomorrow. I think Jed said he's got a story going. Who's the story going out?
Jordan Hall is locked and ready to go.
A Jordan Hall story coming out tomorrow. So make sure that you're subscribed here. Make sure you're a member over on the UGA Sports Vault. And for my co-host, Jed May, I'm Blaine Gilmer, and we'll catch you guys next time on UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts.